Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. Just myself running this session with you all today. So do bear with me if you submit questions and things like that. So in CH50 accounts this morning, we're looking at a new series of webinars. We have run projects before, but we've adjusted the split a little bit in these sessions. So we're running projects over the next next 3 Fridays. As in parts 1, 2, and 3. Today's part 1 should last around about 45 minutes. I think that'll be enough time to pick up some questions along the way as well. And we're looking specifically at setting up the project's ledger, so configuring it, but also creating records. And we'll go through a record as well, giving you an idea of the options that you've got available, and we'll sort of be in and out throughout as well. Now, a little bit of housekeeping just for those of you that might be new to webinars, just before we do get started. So you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you do enable it, you'll just find you muted automatically. You can't unmute yourself during the session. So if you do have any questions for me today, you will need to just pop them into the questions panel. To access that, you just need to click the little speech bubble icon on your toolbar, and then you'll have access to the box in the bottom right-hand corner. And that's where you can start typing any comments or questions you have. But do bear in mind, there are 3 parts to these projects webinars. So today, again, we're just looking at the configuration and the initial setup, and also creating records. If anyone wants a copy of my slides that I'm using today, they are available to download. If anyone wants detailed information as well, because we do get the odd comment saying, right, slides are great, but what I want is the detailed sort of step-by-step guides. If you want that level of information is available from our help center. There's a lot more information than I could possibly cover in these sessions. But hopefully you'll find it useful today and give you a good insight into the projects area. Right, so this is what I'm going to be covering in part 1. I'll explain more about part 2 and 3 in just a moment as well. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction to the session and to the project's ledger just in general. We're going to look at sort of the setting up of the project's ledger as well. So what options have you got, and what do you need to think about before you start setting up records and start entering transactions? What is it you want to get out at the other end of the project? So when it's finished, or even during the process of processing transactions, etc., against that project, what is it you want to be able to do? What is it you want to see? What do you want to report on, etc.? We'll look at project records, a couple of options for creating those, either inputting them manually, or there is an option to import as well. Some of you may have been to our importing records sessions that we've run 2 of this week. So if you did attend one of those, then you'll be familiar with the import process. You can see how quick it actually is. So if you've got existing records maybe that you want to bring into CH50, then you can do that. And sometimes importing can be just that little bit quicker. Once we've run through the various demos that we're going to be covering in today's session as well, though, I will sort of explain a little bit more about the additional support, give you an idea of some of those upcoming webinars, which are parts 2 and 3, as well as other topics as well. And then I'll open up to questions as well. So keep your questions and your comments coming, just as we're working through this session today. And I will, as I say, I'll try my best to pick them up for you, whether that be there and then, or maybe it'll be something that I'm aware that we'll be covering in sessions 2 and 3, or maybe it's just something I need to leave until the end of the session. Now, these are the webinars, and this is how we've broken down the webinars for the project. So part 1, which is today's session, as I say, we're looking at the setting up of the project's ledger and creating records. Part 2, which is Friday of next week, we've planned them in at the same time for each of the next 2 Fridays as well. So part 2, we're going to be looking at recording costs and revenue against your projects themselves. So whether that's entering bank payments, invoices, working with purchase orders, and recording revenue, that's what we're going to be looking at in part 2. In part 3, we'll be looking at more of the detailed side, so analysing your projects, sort of managing your budgets, analysing costs, and looking at the reporting options as well. So those two go sort of hand in hand. You can either do it on screen or by running the reports themselves. So that will be 2 weeks today, that one. Now, if you haven't yet registered for them, the links will be included on your follow-up email, and the recordings will be made available after the session's obviously been run as well. We've got some older recordings at the moment, but they will be removed today, and they will be replaced by the new sessions as they take place. So it's the same two links that you need each and every time. Right, now just before I do get started, I'm going to pop a quick poll on your screen if you don't mind. So just to give me an idea, do you currently use the project ledger? So just give me a simple yes or no. And I'll wait till I get a decent percentage of you having voted on that one. And I'll share the results with you once you're done as well. So is it something that maybe you're not even aware of really, and that's why you're along with us today? Is it something you've dabbled with, or maybe you've been using it for quite some time and you just want to, you want a little bit of reassurance that your understanding is almost like the same as mine, and maybe you'll pick up some tips along the way as well. Excellent. So most of you have voted for that one, so thanks for taking part with that one. So just closing, I'll share the results with you as well. So as you can see, we've got 38% of you here today. So how many we got logged in? We've got about 26 of you logged in currently. So about 38% of you are using the projects module, whether that's, you might have just started, you might be quite experienced in that area, but we've got 62% that aren't using it yet. So we're coming along today, hopefully to see what it's all about, and you can make your mind up if you want to use it at that point. Right, let's hide that and we'll get stuck into the demos themselves. So remember, as I say, that you'll be emailed later today as well. So normally around about now after we finish, you'll receive a follow-up email that will include links to, so you can register, but also it'll include a link to today's recording as well. So if you need a bit of a recap, you'll have that there. Right, anyway, let's get started then. So a little bit of background first of all. So the project's ledger itself, it's something that you need to be on the professional level of the software. So if you're on the essentials or the standard level of Sage 50 accounts, you won't actually have the projects option available to you. And it was originally introduced in version 11. So we're just in the process of about to roll out. Some of you may even have version 30. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks, 30 and 30.1. With the latest updates in it. So it's been in there for quite some time. So you're getting on for you're getting on for about 20 years now that's been available in the software. So went through a few updates here and there. The intention of that one was ideally to replace the Sage job costing, which was external, sort of almost like having an extra bit of software which did integrate with Sage 50 accounts. So been around for quite some time. Now, if anyone is using Sage job costing, you should be aware that the job costing package itself, and it's something that hasn't really been developed for years, it's no longer compatible with Sage 50 accounts version 28.1 and above. So that's if you're using the job costing specific software. So the latest version that you could integrate with is version 28.0. Now, the idea of using projects is that it enables you to manage projects, or possibly you may refer to them as like jobs, or maybe even a manufacturing process that you have internally. It just enables you to manage those more effectively. So you'll be able to track costs, revenue, and just generally it'll make you aware of what's involved so you can make better decisions and stay in control of them a little bit. Now, job costing will, I'm going to get this mixed up throughout today now that I've mentioned job costing. Project costing, the option is enabled by default, but just in case you can't see it and you are using the professional level, it's something that may have been switched off. It may just be because of your access rights that you can't see it. And it may be just that you've actually hidden the option. So let's just quickly look at that first of all. I'll quickly share my screen. Gary, you mentioned that you did use job costing a while back. I used to support it when I was actually first released that one. So yeah, I've got to go quite far back with that one. So yeah, there was a few different updates in that one, but as I say, the integration is no longer available from version 28.1 upwards. Right, anyway, you should be able to see my screen at that point. So projects should just be on your toolbar towards the bottom on the left-hand navigation bar there. If you're not sure what level of software you're on, if you are on the professional level, it should mention that just on the title bar on the top, sort of towards the top left corner. So if you can't see it and you are using the professional level, as I say, it could be down to access rights. So it's not enabled for your username. If you're using manager, then obviously you'll have access to everything in the software. But just in case, let's say you're logged in as manager and you still can't see it, then you would just go to settings, company preferences. It'll just get you to pop in your password again. And on the parameters tab, you've got this option here, enable project costing. So as I say, it should be ticked by default. Many years ago it wasn't and you had to enable it, but these days, just to avoid that call coming through to support saying, I've got professional, I can't see it, it is switched on by default. May, your question there, is the project module only for manufacturing? No, it could be for anything. It's anything really that you want to analyze, whether it's a simple sale and you want to record, things like costs against that sale. It could be a manufacturing process. It could be just any project that would have, I suppose, costs associated with it. So hopefully give you a good idea of how that works today. Anyway, it's switched on in my case, as I say, which should be by default. So we'll just okay that. If you don't want to use it, maybe after today you think, actually, that's not for me, then you can always go in and just switch it off and nobody will see that in the software at all. You do have the option as well of if it is enabled and maybe you are using, you should have access to it. So the option, if it's still not there, the only other reason why it would be hidden is that you've hid it from the navigation bar itself. So just right click anywhere on that navigation bar down the left hand side. Projects is one of the options that you can show or hide. So there's other options that you don't use, for instance, diary, for instance, you could switch that one off and it just disappears, declutters your toolbar a little bit. So projects, if you just right click, you can see it on the list. So again, if it's not listed there and you're on the professional level, just right click. It should be there. If you're on the professional level, just tick the option and it should then be available to you and you can get into it at that point. Now, why would you use projects? A lot of people in the past, and this again prior to, I suppose, version 11, going back historically, version 11, a lot of people used to use departments. So they record income and expenses against a specific department and say, right, that's my project. It's not as flexible, the departments option, easy to use. You've got up to 990, well, if you include department 0, you've essentially got 1,000 departments available to you. So there is that restriction to a certain extent. But it doesn't have the capabilities that the projects level does. So reporting wise, the way that you can record transactions, so you can't record against departments, you couldn't do, say, a project only expense against that, whereas you can with the projects module itself. And with projects, you're not restricted to the number of records that you can have. So with departments, I've certainly seen that in the past where people have reached 999 and then you're thinking, well, actually, what do I do now? I've used all those departments. And that's a restriction. You either have to recycle those department numbers if you're going down that route, or, which we would normally recommend, you switch and start using projects. Olga, you mentioned that your projects option isn't on your panel. So as I mentioned, you need to be on the professional level of the software. So it should say in the top left corner, just make sure I'm sharing the right screen there as well. Yeah, So in the top left corner, just on your title bar at the top here, above where it says File Edit View, it must say Professional. If it doesn't say Professional, then you won't have that projects option available to you. Right, let's pop back to the slides for a moment. If I can find the right option. There we go. And we'll move on. So we're going to start looking at sort of the configuration area of the software. That might be something that you're familiar with. From time to time, you will be advised to go into here so you can check things like tax codes and maybe amend your custom fields and things like that. But you'll find lots of project costing options in here as well. With project costing, you tend to find that initially you come into this area when you're first setting up project costing, and you may tweak it here and there as you decide sort of on the level of analysis you want. So we're going to go into this area, and I'll take you through the sort of the 4 sections, as it were. So looking at the project status, the custom fields, the cost types, and the cost codes. Now, in most of these areas, you will have some default settings. And this is where I like to cover this up front, because this is where I always say you need to have a little bit think about how you want to analyze things like your revenue, your costs against your projects, and what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to report on? So we'll have a look at that now. If I can find the right button, there we go. So we're going to go into settings at the top and then into configuration. Just click yes to that prompt. So these are the various tabs. Again, I'm on the professional level, so I've got all the tabs available to me. Again, if you're on lower levels, there'll be certain ones that you don't have. So in professional, I'm going to gain things like I've got the fixed assets tab. What else have I got? And I think project costing, that's probably the main 2 difference. So it's the project costing tab we want at the top there, so top right. You may find everything's on one sort of row as well, depending on your resolution and the size of your monitor. So these are the 4 sort of areas that we want to pick up on, and this is what you need to think about a little bit before you start just heading for charging straight into the projects module itself. Right, so first of all, we've got a project status. So I always think about this as almost like the different stages of a project. So you've got some set up by default when you first go in. You can rename them and remove them if you want to. You'll have to have a minimum of 1 because one of them needs to be set as default. So what I'm going to do is, I'll just quickly run you through them. So we got one called active, one called completed, initial. You've got one called snag, and we've got one called suspend as well. So if you want to add one, all you would do is just click add status, pop in your code, which is equivalent to this and the left-hand side here, and then the description. Now for each status, you've got these 2 boxes. Allow postings and allow deletion. Now, when you set up a project record, each project record will have to have a status attached to it. And it's these little tick boxes attached to the status, which in turn, that status will be attached to the project, that determines what can happen. So if, for instance, we just go up to the top one, the one that is called active by default, you can see this one is flagged as the default. So it means when you set up a new project, it'll pick that one up by default. If you want it to pick up a different one, you can do that. But if you just edit this one, and we can see that this one, when you've got a project record flagged as being active, then it will enable you to post transactions to it. Still make changes whether that's ticked or not. It will still allow you to make changes to the record itself. But if you want to post transactions to it, you've got to have a status attached, or a status attached which will allow postings. You've also got an option here, allow deletion. Say it just sort of toggles between the two. So again, if you're ready at some point in the future to delete your older project records, or maybe projects that you set up that never took off, and you think, well, actually you want to delete it, you've got to then set a status against that project that would allow you to delete it. So we'll just leave that one set as it is. So you can set up additional ones if needed. So, you know, if it's a bit more meaningful to you to, you know, almost have like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, you can do that. And you can rename the ones that are there if required. So that's the project status. Project custom fields, and custom fields may be something that you're already aware of, as they're available in the likes of customer records, supplier records, against invoices and orders these days you've got them, and also things like product records as well. And it's just where you can record additional information. So there are 3 of them for project records. So you got initially these will be called, I think by default, these are the ones I think that are picked up, the default. But if not, they'll be called sort of analysis 1, analysis 2, analysis 3. Now you can rename them for it's whatever you want to record in those fields within the individual records themselves. So I've got one for manager, I've got one for type, and I've actually got one called complete. But you can call them whatever you want. This little text here, so you can have up to 11 characters for these fields. It's the text that will appear in front of that field within the record itself. So rather than just being called analysis 1, 2, and 3, and you thinking, oh yeah, which of those fields do I record the project manager's name against? You can change those titles just to make it a bit more obvious. If you don't do that, you tend to find, you know, if you just record project manager, it'll be in one of the boxes, but you need to be consistent so that you can, it helps with the analysis. I'll show you, obviously we'll be looking at a record a little bit later, and you'll see where I've got manager, type, and also complete. You'll see where that appears. Now the thing to think about most of all is the cost types and the cost codes. So have a bit think about how do you want to analyze the transactions before you start entering them. So cost types, you can have up to 99 of these, and you can have up to 99 cost codes as well. So always try and describe the cost type as the summary of your expenses, so the summary of the categories of your expenses. So for instance, and there's loads of different options for this, and you may find it's something unique to yourself. So the likes of labour. So when we're recording costs, for instance, we want to say, right, this expense, it relates to labour or materials, for instance. So again, you can have up to 99 cost types. A cost code is breaking it down to sort of almost like a secondary level. Now you could keep it really simple and your cost types could be exactly the same as the cost codes. But what you might have is you might want to break down the type of labour, for instance. So you might have the different trades, for instance. So if you want construction, you might have, you know, like labourers, you might have electricians, plumbers, that type of thing. So you sort of, as you're recording costs, you're breaking that cost down against the different types of the different trades that you employ. So you can, again, you could report on that. It might be that actually you set up your cost types as the different trades, and within the cost codes you go for things like different rates of pay. So if where you're charging out, or you want to show an expense as standard time, time and a half, or double time, that type of thing, you can do that. So again, it depends what you've only got those 2 levels to play with, and it depends what level of detail you're going to want out at the other end. So when it comes to reporting analysis, what do you want to see? What you don't want to do is just say, right, I want labor only. You go and enter all of your transactions, and then you think, right, how much of that expense for labor was for electrical work and how much was for plumbing? And because you haven't set up cost codes to break it down, then you don't want to have to come back and then sort of set up those cost codes and then go and amend your transactions one at a time to reassign them to the relevant cost code. So have a bit think about that. And what is it you want out? How do you want to report on your costs? Again, you might just want to keep it simple. So just so that you get a total labor charge. So it'll be cost type labor, cost code labor, cost type materials, cost code materials, or do you want to break it down? Now to add a type will have a description only. It's just a case of popping in a name, whatever you want, a title, whatever you want to use, whatever you want to call it. Just cancel that one. And obviously for a cost code, only thing that's any different on that one is you will type in a cost code, give it a description, but you will then link that to a cost type. So if I was setting up, let's say, electrician as a cost code, maybe put that in the description as well, and then I would link that to the labor cost type. So it's almost like filling in that sort of that pyramid, as it were. Ada, your question there, just in relation to projects, does the likes of say auto entry, etc., can that link to projects? Yes, it can. So you do have that option, and you would just be a case of amending that transaction. When you scan it or take a picture of it, for instance, you would do that via the auto entry portal, and then it would post that to the relevant thing. May, you mentioned there for your cost codes, can you put things like, if it was a sales project, could you put carriage, marketing costs, etc.? Yeah, it's however you want to analyze that. Margaret, you mentioned there, are you correct in thinking that it's not possible to delete a cost code once there is a transaction posted against it? I'll double check that one for you, Margaret. It's something we'll try and pick up on a bit more when it comes to the next week's session. So anyway, that's the basics of configuring the projects area itself. Again, keep your questions coming. As I say, I'll try and pick up as many of those as we can as we're working through the session today. Right. Next, we're going to look at creating actual records themselves. Now, you've got two options when it comes to creating records, either doing it manually or, as I mentioned earlier, possibly importing them. I'm not aware of many people using the import option in this area. So I'm just gonna run through it and show you the various options. Now, within a project record, what we're going to look at today is the various tabs. So the tabs that you have essentially down the side of a project record. I will cover import as well, just in case anyone wants to see what that process looks like and how you would go about it. So we'll create a record, we'll go through the various options, just explain some of those fields. Right, back to my screen then. And we'll just, again, if you made any changes in this configuration editor, you just click OK, and that's it done. Right, now as far as going into, we'll go into projects. And again, for creating it manually, we've got two options. One is new and one is wizard. We've also got the duplicate option as well. So if you've got an existing project and you think, actually, I'm doing that project again. So you might be doing, there might be a certain job that you're doing on let's say customer's property and you think, actually, it's the same job on this other customer's property, you could always highlight it, click duplicate, and it would just copy all your settings for you. And then you can go and make amends, etc. But for creating one from scratch, we've got two options, new or wizard. Now, you'll probably be familiar with these. The idea of the wizard option is that it takes you through these sort of numbered steps, or breaking it down. Julie, you're just saying you can't see any questions that are being asked. Yeah, you won't see those questions. Not unless I type an answer to those questions. I'm just going to read them out today because it's only myself running this session. So you'll not see any questions or answers being typed because there's no one in the background typing those answers. Much easier for me to read them and just try and demo them here and there, or give you a verbal answer. Right, so this is the wizard. The idea of this one is, again, you might be familiar with it from things like customers, suppliers, nominal, where you've got this wizard and it's just going to take you through step by step. So breaking it down into manageable chunks. So popping in a name, project reference, which is actually the only required field when you're creating a project. Use the reference itself, and also a description, and then you would just click next and start following that through. Just close out of that one. The other option is to click the new option. So that just gives me a blank record and I can start keying in the details themselves. So if I just pop one in, say 1, 2, 3, I'll just call it test for the sake of argument. As the name. I've got a description field as well. So you'll find for your, first of all, the project reference, you can have that up to 12 characters, that one. The name is up to 60 characters, so a bit of abbreviation of what that is. Description, you can include a lot more detail if needed. So you've got 255 characters for that one. I just can't call it test description. Now, actually, that's more than enough for me to be able to save the record. The only thing I actually do need a key in is a project reference. So I'll just save that. And you'll see it appears on the list there against some of my other projects I've got set up. You also see the status is active. So that one that I did have flagged as the default, it's picked that up. Let's just go back into the record though. Right, so we've got our project reference, we've got the name, we've got a description, we've got a start date and also an end date. Now these are for reference purposes only. The dates do not sort of enable or prevent the posting of things like costs or anything like that to it. You know, just because maybe you haven't hit that date yet, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to record transactions. So really, they're just there for reference. You will be able to report on that and filter and things like that, but generally speaking, they are just for reference purposes only. So both of them will pick up today's date by default. So I'll just change them a little bit. We'll say that one is likely to begin on the 1st of May. You've got your status. So that's what we looked at earlier within the configuration. So just in case if you're choosing one from the drop down. So it's picked up that default one. The little boxes here, we always get asked about this. Why are they grayed out? It's just showing you the settings from within configuration. So it'll give you an idea for this status, what I'm able to do. So am I allowed to post transactions to it with this status, or will it let me delete it? So if I was to choose one of the other ones, for instance, completed, you'll see the two options for that one. It wouldn't allow me to post any transactions because it's not enabled, but it would allow me to delete that record if I was in a position to do so. Just set that back to active though. So these are grayed out. If you need to change those options, again, you need to do that within the configuration area. Next, you've got the customer details area. Now, chances are, probably a 50-50 thing this as well, is that your project might not actually relate to a customer that you've got set up. It might be that if you were building a property, for instance, it might be that actually you don't have a customer for that yet. It might be that your project in this instance, it might be for you might be internally, you might be manufacturing 100 units of something, for instance. Actually, there's not a specific customer for that one. It's just once you've got those units, then you'll sell them. So it is optional. So if you click the account reference, it will let you select the customer, or if it's a brand new customer, you could click new at that point and set them up with a record. You've got the order number field. Again, that's just a manual reference, that one. So it might be something that if it is coming from a customer, they may have a specific order number they want to provide for you. And if you do select an account reference, we might as well select one. It will bring through the name of the customer as well. You've got site details as well. So you've got the option to key in a contact name and an address option as well. To see if you're keying it in, you might not be familiar with this option yet, but if you've got an address on an email, for instance, if you just highlight it, copy it, and then you could use this option to paste that in rather than keying that in again. We'll just split it for you accordingly. I can't remember what version that came in on now. I think it was about 28.1, 28.2, where you had the ability to paste an address in just by copying it from an email or some sort of other document. So nice and straightforward, that first tab. We'll move on to the analysis tab. Now, the analysis tab, obviously, you'll see more of this when we start recording transactions in session 2 and 3 if you're coming along to those ones. So the only thing that you can really key in here in, I suppose, 4 options. One is the price quoted. So I'll just key in, say, £10,000. And then you've got the analysis types as well. So this is where we looked at what we looked at earlier. So these are the 3 additional fields where you can record additional information if required. So if I just say, right, the project manager for this one is, say, Bob. Now this isn't case sensitive, this one, just in case anyone's thinking about that one. So when you apply things like filters and you want to filter on the likes of the manager field, for instance, you might think, well, give me a list of all of the projects where Bob is assigned as the manager. Then you could do that. So it doesn't matter whether you've typed Bob lowercase b at the beginning or uppercase, it makes no difference as long as it's spelled the same. And it is alphanumeric, that one as well. And for each field, as far as keying into these fields, you can up to 30 characters in each of those. But as you can see, it's pulled through those titles. So if you've got a specific use for it, then that's where you can go and change the titles, and it just means that people are consistent keying the information into a set field. Now, as I mentioned, we will be going through these things like the billing totals as we start entering transactions next week. But this will give you a summary of your project as you start using it. Let me just save that one, and let's go into this other one and see if I've got some information already entered. I've got some entered, but not much. So this would be a billing. So any sort of revenue where you've entered, let's say, an invoice, possibly even a credit, bank receipts, when you're recording that and you're saying, right, this revenue, this income, I want to assign to this specific project, then it will start updating this area. You've got revenue totals as well. So profit to date, outstanding to bill, price quoted. So again, straightforward. You've got budgeting information, so your totals. And then you've got your cost totals as well. And again, we'll be going through those in a bit more detail as we enter transactions in session 2. Also, obviously, pick up in session 3 when we start analysing it as well. So anyone sitting there wondering, well, what's the difference between an actual cost and a committed cost? That's what we're going to be picking up in session 2. Right, let's quickly pick up on our next tab, which is the budgets tab. Now, when we go into budgets, and this will be something that I know, Ada, you mentioned earlier that you'd used project costing earlier. I think it was yourself that, yeah, it was. Yeah, sorry, it was yourself that mentioned that one. In the old job costing, once you set up things like cost types and cost codes, you used to have to come in and manually add them into the likes of this type of field. With the projects area, they're automatically added. So if I just go close out of here for a moment, what I'll do is if I pop into settings and configuration, we'll go into project costing. And if I was to add a type, and I'll just call it 1MC, so I'll put my initials on it. And I'll add a code as well. So I'll just call this the same thing. So I'll just call it MC standard time, and we'll assign that to the 1MC. Just okay that. I'll add a second one as well, so MC2. And again, I'll assign that to that cost type. So I'll just okay that. And if we go back into a project record, let's just pick this one up, back into budgets, and you can see it adds it in automatically. So it'll do that for all of your projects. So any cost types and cost codes that you set up will automatically be pulled through into this area. Right, just going to quickly go back to Diva's question there. Diva, we mentioned, I'm hoping pronouncing your name right there. Can a price quoted field be updated from a sales order linked to a project? No, it does not link. The quoted price would need to come from the actual, just literally by manually entering it. So it doesn't link at that stage. I think the reason for that is potentially you could have a number of sales orders which could potentially link to the same project. There'd be nothing to prevent that. Similar for things like purchase orders, that type of thing, etc. as well. You might think, well, I'd never do that, but actually you can do it. So that's the reason it doesn't. So you just need to be for the actual project. So going back to the analysis, just in case of you manually entering that price quoted for the specific project itself. Right, so coming back to budgets, any cost types, cost codes for all of your projects, they'll automatically be added. You can sort of see that we've got a one there, labor, we've got these various different types of cost codes and the various descriptions with it. And it would then just be a case of keying in the budget amounts themselves. So that's a manual process, that one. So if I just keyed it in, and again, have a bit think about this. So what sort of analysis wise, reporting wise, what is the information that you want? Are you wanting to set are you wanting to break down the likes of all of your labor charges or your materials, that type of thing? Are you want to show that level of detail? So just in case if you keep clicking against the relevant cost type and cost code into the budget column, and it's just a case of you completing the fields at that point. I'll put one against that MC standard time as well. So let's say 500 for that one. So that's how easy it is. You can come in and amend these at any point. So you got your total there at the bottom as well, and obviously that will feed back through to your budgets area here as well. So budgets is obviously very straightforward. You can amend those at just about any time. Right, I'm going to pop back to the slides just for a moment, and I want to pick up on just before I pick up on the structure tab. Now, the structure tab, if we just pop back to that slide, enables you to set up a structure for your project. So it means that you can have sub-projects. So again, you can start making it it can be quite complex and quite in-depth project costing. You can have up to 10 levels of sub-projects. So we've just got an example there on screen. So let's say the main project is to build a garage. But actually, I want to set up a project, so I want to record all my costs and possibly any revenue for things like groundwork, brickwork. I want to have as a totally separate project and popping on the roof for the building of the garage. So those three sort of sub-projects make up the main one. But for groundwork, we've broken that down even further. So digging foundations and popping in new foundations. So again, each of those sub-projects needs to be set up as a project record. Excuse me. That it needs to be set up as a project record in its own right. Remember, there's no limit to the number of project records that you can set up, but it's up to 10 levels. Now, I've never come across anyone using 10 levels within the structure area, but obviously you've got that option available should you need it. I suppose it's very much going to depend on sort of the size of your projects with regard to the analysis. I don't think any of you will be planning like HS2, for instance. So I don't think you'd need that many sub-projects, but you do have options should it be needed. Sometimes it's just a bit more manageable breaking your projects down. When you mentioned about budgets can't be imported. They do need to be just keyed in manually. Right, anyway, we'll go back to that structure tab. So we'll go back to my screen. We'll quickly have a look at the structure tab. So if I go into, I'm going to go into this one, project 1. We're going to say we want to add a bit of a substructure, as it were. So we want to add some sub-projects to it. So we can either add a new project or we can add an existing one. And when I choose add existing, it will just give me a list of the projects that I've already got set up. So we'll say I want to add that one, select it. Oh, we got them linked to different customers. Let's just choose that one then. I've just set that one up. No, I'll not, because I've got them assigned to different customers at the minute. Great. So I'm sure you get the idea. So you can have your substructure within it. You've got analysis options, so going to give you totals. Now, once you've got a list of sub projects set up, this option will be available to you as well. So when you're viewing options, these sort of totals, or you want to see it for your main project, or you want to include what you term rolled up totals, so bringing in all the costs and the revenue, etc., from your other projects as well. So again, nice and straightforward. I've not come across many people using the structure option, but it is, as I say, it is there should you want it. Right, final tab that I'm going to cover in this session very briefly is the memo tab. Now, the memo tab, I always think it's one of the few areas in the software that, although it's available throughout, it's one of the few areas where you're more likely to use it. So it's split into two areas. You've got your option at the bottom here, which is essentially just a text box. So you can record whatever notes you want. It is just text as well, that one. You've got in the top box, you've got what we term the document manager. I think that's the official term for it. Now, what the document manager does is it enables you to essentially link to other documents. So you can add an attachment, and you can say, right, I either want to attach a document on my PC, or you can just put in a filing system reference. So if I just leave it set to that for a moment, and it will ask me, right, well, where's that held, and what do you call it? Whereas the first option, add attachment, the electronic attachment, it'll ask me, right, well, where's the location of your file? So I'll choose something off my I'll just find a document. It doesn't really matter what I choose. I'll use that one. So I'll say I want to attach that document. So it might have, it could be anything, any documents that you want to associate with it. And then I've got three options. Do I want to leave that file in its current location and just set up a link to it essentially? Do I want to copy that file into my Sage 50 accounts data? Now, bear in mind, it's a copy at that point. So that means you would have the original file in its original location, and you would also have a second copy. So that if you were accessing that file from within Sage, it would mean that if you're updating it, it's not updating the original. Or in this case, do you want to move the file into your Sage 50 accounts data folder? So moving it from its original location, and so you've only got the one file, but it's held within Sage 50 accounts then. So number of options, depends what you want to do. Obviously, if you leave it set to that first one, what it would mean is that if the file was updated, if you access that file from within Sage, you're accessing the original file. So you would just choose your option, just OK that, and that will be it done. So again, set up as many of those links as you want. Right, what I want to quickly do is show you the import option, and just in case anyone wants to go down that route. Let's just close out of this record. Now, if you want to go down the import route, and importing records is something that we covered looking specifically customer records. We've covered that twice this week. So there is a recording of that available if you want to find out a bit more detail for it. But let's say I wanted to import. So I've maybe got some records outside of Sage. I just want to bring them in. It's a little bit quicker than me sitting, maybe keying them in again. Then what I'll do is I'll go to File, into Import, and takes me through this this wizard. Now, if you want an import template, you can click this little link here. And there is specifically a one called Project Record Full Template. So that's provided for you. Now, I've already got one with some of that template completed, so I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll import it. So I'll just get back to the desktop. This is that template. I've saved a copy of it to my desktop, just so you can see what that looks like. So this is it. So we've got basically it's going to provide you with an Excel document, which has got some headings in there. So this is what can be imported. Now this blue sort of color, when it's a heading, it means that's a required field. The yellow ones indicate they are optional. Now, if you hover over one of the headings, and you should find this available for all of them, it will give you an idea of what needs to be included. So I'll pop another one in just so you can see it. Now, I don't think this is case sensitive at all, but I'm going to put it in uppercase. I'll just leave that one as is. I'll not put any other information, but as you can see, you can pop in the reference, the name, the status ID, the start date, end date. You've got the description, customer reference. That customer reference must exist already. It's not going to create one on the fly for you. So it must be to an existing customer reference if you're using that one. Order number, you've got your address information. And if you just scroll across, you'll see you've got some of the other fields as well. We'll put a random figure on that one as well. And I'll just save it. Now, as far as Sage is concerned, if we go back to Sage, to import the information in that file, all I would do is I would go to File, Import. You would take a backup at this point. Always take a backup before you import. I can't stress that one enough. Just click the button, follow that through, take the backup. Once you're done, you click Next, choose what it is you want to import. So it's a project records I want to import. Choose your type of file. So mine's an Excel worksheet. I'll browse for it. So it's on my desktop. There it is there, so we'll choose that one. It does contain headings. It's a template I'm using, so it's got the headings along the top. Now this takes me onto the field mappings, and this is where you've got that added flexibility. So if you've got your own file, you've got information already in there, you don't necessarily have to have the same titles. That's what Sage refers to. So it's saying, right, the reference for your project in your import file, which column is that in? So if you've got your own titles, it might just call project ID or something along those lines. You would just select it from the drop down. So this is actually reading your information. Now, if you didn't have headings, so I'd say it doesn't have headings in my file, what you're going to get on this is, right, which column is that information in? So you're going back to ABC, so a bit harder to determine that. But you probably find that, I think probably the vast majority will have some sort of heading in the import file, making it easy to import. So if you are using the template, all of that mapping is done for you. Just a case of saying, right, whatever Sage requires, it's in that specific column of my import file. Right, so we'll just quickly click import. It's told me it's imported those two that I've just showed you on the import file. And if we go into projects, we've got the two additional ones there that I've just imported. So if you've got a bit of a list, maybe it's coming from other software that doesn't necessarily integrate directly with Sage, then if you can get that into that information into the likes of an Excel spreadsheet, for instance, then as long as it's roughly in the right format, you should then be able to import that. Right, okay, back to the slides, and last sort of bit of advice, I think, for today, for the overview, is have a go of it. Now, if you aren't already using it and you're thinking, well, actually, I want to play around with that, or maybe you are using it and thinking, well, actually, I want to have a go of this option, then remember you've got your demo data and you've got your practice data available. So as long as you are on the professional level of the software, the projects option will be available within the demo and practice options. To access that just in your software, you just go File, Open, and then you'll choose demo data or practice data. And it means that you can have a go of the various options without keying information into your live company. So if you were one of the 62% at the beginning of the session that said, right, I'm not already using it, then do have a go. Right, questions. Now, any questions that we've got outstanding, what I'll do is I'll pick those up separate. So I'll drop you an email by the end of today just with an answer to your questions. So we'll get that just in case I've missed anything as well. I've picked up most of them today, but if there's anything outstanding, I'll just pick those up separately. So you should get an email response from me by the end of today. If you've got any additional questions, you can key them in now and I will pick those up at some point today. But otherwise, just reply to your webinar emails and they will come direct to myself. Now, do remember your follow-up email. It will contain links so that you can register for the other sessions as well. So if you haven't already done so, do get yourself registered. Next week, we're going to be looking at sort of the recording of costs and also revenue as well. So we're starting to get into entering transactions. So not only audit trail transactions, but you also have the ability to record project-only transactions as well. So we'll be looking at all aspects of transactions next week. Week after, we'll be looking at more on the analysis side and the reports. I can see a few questions have come through for that today. We'll be picking up what was in part 3. So again, links so you can register will be included on your follow-up email. And if you want to watch the recordings or a bit of a recap on what we've covered today, that will be available hopefully by the time you get your follow-up email in round about an hour's time. Right, apologies for the overrun. I wasn't expecting it to last this long this morning. I think it's when we start branching off and answering a few questions here and there, it tends to extend the time a little bit. So many thanks for coming along, though. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you've got any thoughts on the session today, then little exit survey will pop up as you leave the session today. If you can take a minute to complete that. then greatly appreciate it. We always love reading those comments, and if you've got any ideas, thoughts, maybe topics you'd like to see covered going forward, pop it on there as well. So if you can take a minute to do that, greatly appreciated. As I say, your follow-up email is going to be with you in round about an hour's time. So thanks for now. I hope to see you on the other sessions as well, so sessions 2 and 3. So a quick question from Warren there, just quickly pick that up, Warren. So sub-projects, can they be imported? Yes, they can. They would just import as normal projects. It's then a case of you setting up that structure yourself. So it's a case of you going into the record and into the structure tab and adding them in if you want to do that, sort of set up that structure within a project. You can't import it as with the structure, if you know what I mean. So you can import the individual projects as individual records, but you're then setting up the structure manually. Hope that makes sense. Right, we'll end the webinar just at that point then. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you again at this time next week. Many thanks.